Hi everyone, good morning. I hope you are able to hear me. Can anyone please confirm?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So in the last session, we started talking about Azure SQL Server. And Azure SQL Server, most of the times we're going to use to have a metadata and logging details that we're going to use. And apart from that, I wanted to take you through a few more details, whatever we discussed in the last time. Apart from that, I'm just going to take you through a few more details. So whatever I experienced in my experience that I'm just going to take you through here. So what happened is, in my case, we use the standard. In one of my project, I have come across this standard to use for database configuration. So when I have used this standard is standard. So we have a database called pre-prod database. We have a database called pre-prod database. Whenever there is a change in the database, whenever there is a change in the database, that time, let's say, for example, there is a change request customer is asking. We don't have a development environment to test it. We have a two environments. One is, that particular point of time, we were having only two environments. One is pre-prod, another is prod. Guys, able to hear me? There is a network issue. So I hope you are able to hear me. Can anyone please confirm again? I connected with
Yes.
my laptop, with mobile network. Okay, so we were having a
Yes.
database. Yeah, yeah. So let me continue. So we were having a database called pre-prod database. And when we are going to use or when we are going to touch this pre-prod is whenever there is a change request in the project, in the pipeline, or in the logic, in that particular case, we wanted to test the logic. To test the logic, we were using this pre-prod. So the pre-prod by default, they have taken the pre-prod configuration is standard. So when I joined in that particular project, very starting, I faced an issue. So what issue I faced is, like for example, they asked me to do some test. They asked me to do one test. So while doing a test, it is taking a very longer time. In order to test that particular logic, I have to run the pipeline. We have a job called hourly job. Every hour, the job is going to be invoked. So the job is going to be triggered. So when I run the job, it is taking time, very longer time. And even after 5 hours also, it is still taking time. But as per my knowledge, that has to complete within hour because the name itself, the job name itself, we are saying that as a hourly job. So every hour it has to execute and that has to be finished within an hour. But that point of time, it was taking very longer time. Then I reached out one of the team member, why it is taking longer time. Is there any problem? So then I got to know whenever you are going to run that particular job, when there is a change request, you have to increase the configuration. You have to increase the number of DTUs. We have to increase the number of DTUs. By default, there is a 10 DTUs are going to be there with the standard because it is a budget friendly. The standard is a budget friendly. So since it is a budget friendly, we have to increase the number of DTUs. By default, it is going to have 10 DTUs. So DTUs means database transfer units. So the standard is going to be configured or measured with the number of DTUs. So we have to increase up to S4. So S4, I'll show you how exactly it is going to be there. So S4 means up to 200 DTUs I have to increase. Up to 200 DTUs I have to increase. So then only it is going to work. Now after increasing this number of DTUs, then it is going to help us to run the job faster. It will take more than 2 hours, definitely, because it is a testing environment. So that is not a problem. If you have a very emergency, if you have a emergency, if you have a urgency to test it, to bring the logic into production, then we have to increase up to 1024 DTS, maximum DTS, if I'm correct. So recently, recently for one of them, one of the requests we have done it. We increased the number of DTS because we wanted to make it live in the next week. That kind of situation we got it. So if we have such kind of requirement, we cannot wait for more hours to run the job, and we cannot wait for more hours to take testing, because we only have to do the testing. We don't have a separate testing team in that particular project. So in that case, we can increase the number of DTS and make sure once you have completed your work, you have to decrease the number of DTS. If you don't decrease the number of DTS, it is going to charge for 200 DTS if there is a 200 DTS, or if there is a 1024 DTS, it is going to be charged. So we have to decrease the number of DTS once your work is completed. So one more note I wanted to say. So once your activity is completed, then make sure to downgrade your complete. So I'm going to show you how we can create a database with a standard pricing tier, and we'll see how we can downgrade if you want to downgrade it. Let's go to the portal. I hope everyone is having a portal in order to do the practice. Let me hit on enter. And I'm just going to take a SQL Server database. So last time I have created a SQL Server with basic. So basic is going to come with a fixed number of details. But when you go for standard, we can increase the number of DTUs and we can decrease the number of DTUs. And by default, it is going to come with the 10 DTUs. Let me hit on create one more new database for our practice. And do not practice with the standard pricing tier. It is going to be a little more charge. I lost my network here because of the power. So let me take the resource group is test resource group only. Let me keep it as it is. So database name I'm taking source is the name of the database. In the last session, we created a SQL server. I'm just going to use this SQL server as it is. The SQL server I'm going to use as it is. Whatever we have created in the last time, the same thing that I'm going to use it. So we don't need to create a multiple servers. Once you have a server, under the server, you can have a multiple databases, a database one and database two, and so on, you can have it. So as many as databases as you require, you can take once you created a server. We already created this server. So since we already created a server, I don't need to recreate again one more server. We don't need to do it. So with the same thing, I'm just going to do it. Let's take a development. And I'm just going to take the compute now here. Compute is going to have a storage plus compute. Hit on configure. By default, it is having a general purpose, but I don't need the vCore pricing tier or vCore purchasing model. I'm just going to take a pricing tier from the DTU based purchasing model so that we can have a less cost. So in my pre-prod, we were using this standard. It's a budget friendly, means you can decrease or increase. We have a full control from our side. And we are also having high availability and performance. If you are using it for the production, then it is fine. But for practicing, do not go for any of them except the basic and standard. I recommend it to keep only basic. I do not recommend for others. So let me hit on basic. Sorry, standard. Now you can see here the number of details minimum is 10. You cannot reduce less than 10. You cannot go less than 10. You have to use up to 10 only first. And maximum is 3000 DTUs is the maximum number of DTUs. You can see per month estimated cost is this one for 2 GB, and we can have a up to 1024 GB. That means 1 TB. Up to 1 TB, we can save the data in the database. If you have a more than 1 TB, then this pricing tier is not suitable. All these things will be taken care by database administrators. We are not going to be responsible for this. So in one of the situation, we were not having all those particular kind of options. So we used to reduce the number of DTUs, and we used to reduce the we used to reduce the compute and increase the compute whenever it is required. So up to 200 DTU means you can see here S4. Up to S4, we have to increase, and the size is there max to 250 GB is there. So 250 GB was the size that we are having, and 200 DTUs, up to 200 DTUs, we can bring it. So 10 DTUs also maximum 250 GB only. So this 250 GB should not increase in my pre-prod. And if it is increasing, then the number of DTUs, I need to increase it. So then only it is going to be there. So in one of the situation, I increased up to 1000 DTUs. So 800 is there, that is fine. So depends on my requirement, I can increase the number of DTUs and I can apply it. But if we do like this, then the charge is going to get very, very huge. So I don't want to do that. I just wanted to keep only minimum number of DTUs to create a database for practicing. Let me hit on apply. Let's take a locally redundant storage. I don't want to go for any other. And then go to next. So this was already setup is done in the last session for SQL Server. I'm just going to add a current IP address for my current database. Let me hit on review plus create and create. So once you have a SQL servers, whatever the pricing tier it is, we don't care about the pricing tier. We don't care about the pricing tier. Once you have a SQL servers, we have to extract or we have to read the data from the SQL servers. So just imagine these are all the databases or SQL server. The SQL server is having a databases. The SQL server is having a databases. Database 1 and database 2 4. I'm just having databases like this. So one of the database, I'm just going to take a data store is one database. Another database is source database. Just now we created. So like this, we are going to have a data in the SQL server. So whenever you are going to create a SQL, whenever you are going to connect with the SQL server as a data engineer, what we have to ask your team, or what we need to get the details to connect is server name is required. In our case, our server name is, go to resource. You can find the server name here. Someone is going to give a server name to you. If you don't have a server name, then we cannot connect it. So I'm just going to give the server name here. And database name. So which database name we are going to connect? I want to connect for this database. I want to connect for data store, or I want to connect for source database. At the same time, how we are going to connect is by using client tools. We are going to have a various client tools. We are going to have a various client tools. So one of them is SQL Server Management Studio. SQL Server Management Studio is one of the client tool. Another tool is Azure Data Studio. Another is Microsoft Portal Client, Azure Portal Client. And we can also connect with the help of Azure Data Factory. And we are going to connect with the Azure Databricks also. So by using all these connectivity tools, we can connect it. So in order to connect it, what we required? We required connection details. In order to connect to this particular systems, we required connection details. If you don't have a connection details, you or me cannot do anything. So connection details are required in order to access your data sources. So the reason why I'm taking this one is because you have to understand how exactly we are going to connect with the SQL Server databases. It's very, very important for us. So SQL Server Management Studio, we already seen how we can install and set up at the time of prerequisites. We just go through that recording. You can understand how we can install SQL Server Management Studio. So once you install SQL Server Management Studio, you're going to get SQL Server Management Studio and Azure Data Studio also. So both you are going to get with the single installation. With the single installation, you are going to get it. And Azure Portal Client, we can directly use this in the portal. And these two are the major things that we are going to use as part of our development as a Azure Data Engineer. So these two are very, very important. Azure Data Factory and Azure Databricks. So Azure Databricks is very less, sorry, I have written wrong here. It is the Azure Databricks, ADB. So Azure Databricks we are going to use in order to access the data from there. With all these things, we are going to see more in detail so that we can get better clarity. Any doubt up to here as of now? I'll show you how we can connect with the SQL Server Management Studio. Now we have created a database here, right? I have a server. I wanted to connect to this server. With the portal, you can see here, the portal also is having a connector called query editor. By using the query editor, we can connect it. This is a portal client. So it's in a preview mode. It's not a better tool or better place to work with the SQL code. Let me hit on query editor. So login name is Bhaskar and provide the password. So these details we created in the last session while creating the SQL server. Hit OK. Okay, so I understand what is the reason. Give me a minute. I'm just changing my network. If I connect with the mobile network, it will not work properly. Where is my network? Just be on hold. Okay. So I hope you are able to hear me. Can you please confirm again? So whenever there is a network changes is happen, then you have to make sure to add your client IP address. So let me go to the server, set server firewall. I have to add my current network, current IP address. Let me save it. Now I have a server name here and let me hit on query editor to connect it. And let's pass your password to connect it. Hit on OK. If I expand these tables, I'm not able to see anything here. We have to create the tables. Now the question is, who is going to create the tables? Who is going to create the tables? In general, if it is a metadata tables, if it is a metadata tables, then we are going to create the tables. Meta tables will be created by data engineers only. So that means you or someone is going to create it. We don't care about who is going to create, but someone is going to create these tables. So that means you should know how to create a table. You should know how to create a tables. So that is one thing. Another thing is there is a concept called delta tables we are going to create. Delta tables. So where we are going to create this delta tables is in the Databricks. In the Databricks, we are going to create a tables called delta tables. This is very, very important. When you go for interview, they're going to ask, did you work with the delta tables? Did you know how to handle the delta tables? Then 100% you should know how to create a tables. Even for this also, you should know how we can create a table. So creation of the table is very, very important for the data engineers. You may not create a tables for the business. You may not create a table for SQL Server, but you are going to create a delta tables. You're going to create a delta tables. So that means you need to have some basic idea about how we can create a tables. If we can understand how we can create a tables in the SQL, the same to same are 90% is very much similar. You can feel, I feel both are same, even if there is some changes, because those changes are adaptable changes. That is one thing. And other thing is, in order to get the data from the metadata tables, in order to read the data from the metadata tables, or in order to read the data from, in order to read the data from the delta tables, in order to read the data from the delta tables, or in order to read the data from the metadata tables, we should know about select statement. We should know about select statement. If you know select statement, then only you can read the data from anywhere. So you may think that we are not going to deal with the database, so we don't need a SQL. 100% is wrong. So we require SQL, especially the select statement is very, very important for data engineers because you are going to deal with the data tables. You have to read the data from data tables. You have to apply transformations on top of it, either by using the Python code or by using the SQL code. So the mixed code, I used to take it in order to handle the data transformations as part of Databricks. So we need to know about the SQL statement, that is specifically select statement. So select is going to use for reading. This is for reading. We're going to use it for reading data from the databases, either from the delta tables or SQL Server tables. And I told you, in order to feed the data into these tables, into metadata tables, I don't care how we are going to load the data into delta tables because delta tables, loading data into delta tables is a different approach that we are going to do it. Mostly we are not going to use the insert statement, but when it comes to the metadata tables, we have to insert it. So that means insert is required and update is required. I came across it, update and delete also is required. So whenever you wanted to insert any new ingestion in the process, I have some process to ingest the data. So this is a data processing. You just imagine. Some framework I'm having data processing framework. So this processing, if you want to bring any new table into this process, the table should be there in the metadata tables. We are going to talk about all these details. If I talk all these details, you may get little confusion. You don't worry about it. At the time of working, at the time of practical implementation, you can understand how we are going to ingest the new ingestion or new entry into the control tables to bring that into the data processing. So whenever there is a new table in the requirement to bring into the data processing, we have to bring into first metadata tables. So to bring that into metadata tables, no one will come and insert for you. As a data engineer, you have to insert the record. While doing a testing in the development environment, you can have an insert statement. And if you wanted to retest it again and again, you have to update the statement also. You have to update the statement. And if you feel if there is any wrong entries in the control table, then there is a chances to delete also. Especially in the dev environment, you are going to have a permissions to update and delete. But when it comes to the pre-prod or when it comes to the prod, you will be having only reading permissions for most of them. The people who are having little more experience and SQL knowledge, they are going to keep access for update and delete. So you have to read someone else to update if you want to update it. So that means here we require a SQL, here we require a SQL, And in order to read the data, we require a SQL. So SQL is very, very important for data engineers. So the reason why I'm touching all these points is because you have to understand SQL. Without SQL, you cannot work as a data engineer. So you don't need to write a stored procedures. We are going to be out of stored procedures. In place of stored procedures, we can write a Databricks notebooks. Okay, so you don't need very stronger knowledge in SQL. The basic knowledge is much more enough. So that I'm going to take you through from today onwards, from now onwards. I hope you're with me. Do you have any questions as of now? Why we need to have a SQL? Did you understand? Any question, guys?
Uh, yes, sir. So one question, not regarding to SQL, it's regarding to DTU, sir. So you said
Mm-hmm.
in the job, like the job was running very slow. It has to be completed within 1 hour, but it was taking time.
Mm-hmm.
So you you got to know that you got to know from your colleague that it's because of the DTU is less.
Yes.
So you increase the D2 and it worked. So how we'll get to know, like if in case the job is running slow, how we'll get to know it is a DTU problem or if it is the other problem?
Good question. So if you're a very new person to the team, that was the very starting of my project, that particular project. So I was very new for that. So I need to depend on someone else because we were not going to be aware of the entire process. So if you're aware of the process, especially in a testing, if it is a production, you can think in different ways. We have a different approaches. So yesterday, how much time it has taken. Today, why it is taking longer time. There are many reasons will be there, and where exactly which activity is taking more time. So again, deep dive into the pipeline. We are going to have a pipeline. So in pipeline, we are going to have a activities. We are going to start talking about it. So inside the activities, which activity is taking longer time? If it is taking a copy data, and what is the source for copy data? Okay, and if it is for notebook, then why notebook is taking longer time? You can open the notebook and you can go into the details of this notebook in which command it is taking longer time. So in that way, we can understand where exactly it is taking longer time. So we'll talk about those kind of things in the future sessions. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so the SQL is very important here. So for a few days, I thought of starting data factory today itself, but before going to the data factory, I wanted to spend 1 week time with the SQL to make you to understand with the SQL. So that those things will be helpful at the time of Spark SQL. Spark SQL is going to be understandable if you understand the SQL. The Spark SQL is part of your Databricks. Now I'm able to see here, I'm able to connect it. Now the question is how you can connect with the SQL Server Management Studio. I want to connect with the SQL Server Management Studio. I do not recommend to connect with the portal. Portal is not recommended. Let's open the SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS. This is the one. Just open it. So here also we are going to provide the same connectivity details. So it is asking what is the server type, database engine, server name. Just provide the server name here. Whatever the server name they have given, you have to enter that server name. What type of authentication we need to use? They will say about it. What type of authentication? If it is Windows authentication, we don't need to provide any username and password. Automatically, it will take Windows login details. So in my case, I have to take the SQL server here. Let me copy it again. 3, 2, 1. This is the server name and provide the server name here. I just provided the server name. And what type of authentication I required that I need to provide as SQL Server authentication. While creating a SQL Server, we have chosen SQL authentication. They will guide you what type of authentication we have to use it if you are very new to the project. And then password, we just provide the password, whatever the password they have given. And let's take an optional and hit on connect. Expand the databases. You can see here two databases are there. One is data store, another is source. Two databases were there. So this data store is basic pricing tier, and this is a standard. We're going to have a standard pricing tier it is. Now I wanted to create a table. Just observe how I'm going to create a table. If I wanted to create a table, you should know about how can we create a table in SQL. That is important. So in order to create a table, you have to understand the sequence. A few parts are there in the SQL. One is DDL, that is a data definition language. I'm not talking about complete SQL. So whatever we require, that I'm just going to take you through. Just follow what I said. That's more and more enough. And the second is DML. That is also is important for data engineers. Data manipulation language. It's a part of SQL only. The third is DQL or DR. Data querying language. These three are important for us. We don't need to control the transactions. We don't need to have any control on the transactions, but we need to know about all these three. As a data engineers, we are going to create a tables with the help of DDL. As a data engineer, we have to feed the data into the control tables. So we need to know about the DML. And as a data engineer, we have to read the data from the tables, either database tables or delta tables. Whatever, we are going to use the DQL, select statement. So select statement is very, very important for us. 80% of the time we are going to spend with the select statement in the Databricks, rest of them with DDL and DML. So whatever we know, we are going to use that alone. So I have given here what I'm trying to say, data definition language. Data definition language is type of SQL language that is used to define the structure of the database. So the database is going to be having, the database is going to have, like, we are going to have a tables. So the database is always going to have a tables. So that means you should know how we need to create a tables. And the database is going to have a views. So we should know how we need to create a views. And the database is also going to have a stored procedures. In some places, we are going to use the stored procedures also, but very, very less chances. This is only for logging. Only for logging, we are going to use it. Not for other activities, not for data. If you go for SQL developers, they may use it for data transformations, They may use it for other activities, but in our case, mostly we are going to use it for logging or updating the control table, or even to update the control tables, we are going to use it to update control tables. And we have indexes and all those things, we don't care about it. Okay, so I'm just giving indexes. As part of this, we are going to see the tables, we are going to see the views, and we are going to see the stored procedure, which is specific to logging and updating of the control table. In these two places only we are going to use it. So in order to create a table, we are going to use a DDL, a data definition language. The structure of the database can be handled by using this. That means we can create the object, everything is an object, table is an object, view is an object. So we can create an object, or we can modify the database objects such as tables, views, indexes, and constraints. The main purpose of the DDL is to specify the schema or structure of the database. So why we are going to create this tables is to organize the data in the rows and columns. In the form of rows and columns, we are going to organize it. I have a variety options here: create, alter, drop, and truncate. So create is used to create a table. Create is used to create an index. Create is used to create a database object. So if you want to create a database object, the database object may be table, anything. So if you want to create a database object, we are going to use the create statement. So I wanted to create a table with some columns. Just imagine column 1, column 2, and column 3. Column 1, column 2, and column 3. Then you have to use the create statement. I wanted to alter it. Alter means modification of the table. Modification, a structure of the table. The structure of this table is 3 columns. If I wanted to add a new column after creation of the table, then that we can do with the help of alter. With the help of alter, we can do it. And if you want to drop this table completely, if you want to remove this table, then you have to use the drop. So let me go a little more in detail so that you can understand with all these statements. So in order to create a table, we have to use the syntax of this. Create table name. So here you have to provide the name of the table. And column 1, data type, constraint. Column 2, data type, constraint, and so on. So as many columns as you want, you can specify that. So I wanted to create a table. I wanted to create a table with these columns. Just observe here. We have a few data types. One is int to store the numbers. Especially in SQL Server, I'm saying, even if you go for Databricks with the Delta tables also, we are going to use the int data type. And varchar. So varchar will be used to store the text data. To store the text data, we are going to use the same data type in Delta tables. In Delta tables, we are going to have a string data type. So string is used to store text data. This is in the database. And int is there, same for numbers. I'm just giving a differentiation also here. And in order to store the currencies, we have a money data type in SQL Server to store decimal numbers. decimal or currencies. But when it comes to here, we are going to have a other data types, like we have a decimal here, we have a float. Okay, so varieties of data types we're having it. So you can feel that while touching in the Databricks, you can feel some differences. So here mostly I'm going to use these three data types only in SQL while creating a database. And one more data type that I'm going to use is datetime. So datetime is going to store the datetime data. So if you wanted to store date and time related data, then definitely the column should have a datetime data type. So I wanted to create a table with all these columns. Just observe, I'm taking an Excel for reference. So customer ID is the column and customer first name, customer last name, customer sales. I think this columns I'm taking it. So these are all the columns we're having. I wanted to create a table. Just imagine. So let me highlight with different colors so that you can understand. These are all the headers. So customer ID 101. I wanted to add it. First, create a table. So this column, what type of column is? This is a number column. And these are all the text columns, text data. And this is a number columns. So that means even sales is also a number. The number which is going to be there in the decimal places. So currency numbers. So in order to create this table, how we are going to create it, we'll see now. So I'm just taking out it. Create table. Table name is customer. So I'm taking the name of the table as a customer where you are creating inside the source database. How do you know in which database you are creating your SQL Server table is? This will say what database it is. And here also you are going to have this details, database details, what user is connected to this database and what server it is, where exactly this source database is available. So all the database details are going to be there here. Inside that database, I'm trying to create a database. I'm trying to create a table called customer. So I wanted to create a table called customer, column name, customer ID of type is integer data type. So forget about the primary key, forget about foreign key, forget about all the constraints. We are not a SQL developers. I'm just creating a normal column in the table. In the second column, I'm going to create is customer underscore first underscore name, first name. So I wanted to store the text data here. I wanted to store the text data. Something like this, I wanted to store text data. Then definitely our data type should be varchar. I'm just taking some size 50. The size of this column name, data type. And customer underscore last underscore name of type varchar 50. So here also I'm going to have a same data type to store my last name. And then I wanted to store my sales also. Customer underscore sales. So this one I'm going to take it as a money data type. I don't have any data tables here. If you expand this database, you cannot find any tables here. No tables are available. It's just trying to read the data from there. I don't have any tables. So I'm just going to create this state. I'm just going to execute this statement in order to create this table with these columns. Why we are going to have this tables is to have a structured data. To store the structured data, we are going to use the tables. The data is going to be there in this place in the form of rows and columns. So let me execute it. Now command is succeeded. Just refresh this folder. Refresh this tables folder. You can see here. Object is created. And the same thing I wanted to see with another client tool, that is Azure Data Studio. So I wanted to see with the Azure Data Studio also. So while installing of your SQL Server Management Studio, you're going to get Azure Data Studio also. Let's open it. Let me hit on new connection. It is asking SQL Server. Server name I wanted to take. So whatever the server name I have used here to connect, let me take the same server name, copy and paste it here. So all these credentials you just keep in some notepad so that you don't need to go here and there. You can find it one place and you can use it for connectivity. SQL login, username is Bhaskar and password. Provide the password and database is, I wanted to take a source database and encrypt is, just leave it. Encrypt is not required, just leave it. And this one also, trust certificate is false. I don't need all of them. Just hit on connect. You can expand the tables. You can see there is a customer table with all these columns. And if you want to write a select statement, you just right click on it, select top 1000 rows. I don't have the data here. Now I wanted to insert the data into this table. The same record I wanted to insert it. How can you insert it? We'll see that. How we can insert it, we'll see. But before that, I wanted to talk a few more things. I created a table. After creation of the table, the customer is asking to add a new column. The column is customer underscore gender. They're asking to add a new column called customer underscore gender. That means they're asking alteration. They're asking alteration of the table. Adding a new column to the existed table or removing the column from the existed table is known as an alteration. You're doing an alteration. This kind of things is going to be happen very frequently for metadata tables. There may be some chances, but until unless there is a specific reasons, you are not supposed to add the tables. But definitely we are going to use them. So we need to know how we can alter the table. In order to alter the table, we have a statement called alter. Create we have seen. Create is used to create a database object. Alter is used to alter the object. So inside alter, I have a few options. Add, we can add a new column, alter column to modify the existed column structure. If you want to modify the existed column structure, then you can use alter column. And drop column is used to drop the existed column from the table. So three things we are going to see practically. And I'm stopping here. Tomorrow we are going to see how we can alter the tables, and DDL we are going to complete it. And once the DDL is completed, if I wanted to feed the data into the table, how we can feed the data into the table, we are going to see. These things are very important for metadata tables. You have to deal with the metadata tables. So they're going to ask you to insert a new entry into the table whenever there is a new feed into the process. Because the process, once you have created everything, the process is scheduled, the process is automated. So whenever there is a new table to come inside the process, you have to enter into the entry. So how exactly you're going to start your working when it is a development or when it is a existed process, how we can start doing the working, we'll talk about it more in detail. Okay, when the time comes. So now I'm stopping here, and if you have any questions, you can ask me. So is everyone created an account, guys? Is everyone having? You need to have an account now onwards.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if anyone is not yet created, please let me know. If you are not able to create it, I'll help you to create it. Okay then, I'm stopping here. We'll see you on tomorrow. Thank you for joining.